So, welcome to Idea Sex Discussions. I'm here with Julie Tyler.
That's me.
I've known Julie for a few years now. She's an excellent salsa dancer, I can tell you that. And she's also good at the zouk, which is one of my 2019 goals, is to get good at the zouk.
Oh, good.
But we're here to talk about ideas and how to make this world a better place through speaking about ideas that need more procreation, birthing, and things like that. So, I know that you used to be a teacher in the university setting, and the universities have been seeming to have a lot of, let's say, energy going on between them with things like safe spaces and I guess students not wanting to feel offended.
Right.
So how was your experience while you were teaching in the college university setting on something like that?
You know, this is a great question, and I taught in a university or college setting for 10 years, various institutions. And in terms of the safe space, I always felt that it was really important to create a classroom environment where people could say something relevant to whatever the topic of the lesson was about. But under no circumstances would I have ever tolerated any overt forms of bigotry or cruelty or unkindness or anything like that. But you know, I don't really remember it being that big of a deal. I didn't have anybody ever come in and attempt to do that. I think I projected this persona that it was very clear that it was unacceptable and that it was not productive. And this was even the case when we would read poems or read stories that were on incendiary topics like racism, sexuality, things like that. I never once had any student call anybody a racial slur or make fun of another student because of their sexual orientation. I never once had to deal with that, and I never felt that if I had to correct a student, on something, I never felt like they took it as they were being silenced. Of course, they might have taken it that way, but I would always just sort of suggest, like, okay, that's a nice idea, or that's fine that's your idea, but pause and consider this other, mode of thinking that perhaps, you are being a little cruel or insensitive.
So how do you think the universities can go about making that a more fundamental part of the curriculum? That, we are here to challenge what you may have learned at home, because you are not at home anymore. Now you are outside in the world, and the world has a lot of ideas, a lot of different, topics that some may be offensive, and, how do we teach people to think critically, but yet, again, just discuss without it getting so emotional? How can we do that in universities more fundamental?
Yeah, I think that this is going to have to come across at the teacher classroom level.
So bottom up?
Sort of a bottom up, because when something comes through from administration, they're not really dealing on a daily basis with what it's like to be in a classroom managing teenagers, young adults. It's not really that effective, but I think teachers or professors within their departments can form groups among themselves and talk about best practices and strategies for connecting the curriculum to real world issues and the best ways to facilitate a classroom conversation. It really comes down to curating the right conversation, asking the right questions that will bring forth a range of answers and welcome a range of answers, but the format of those answers should always be, here's an idea we can consider, let's think about this, as opposed to something that's totally inappropriate and hate mongering and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So are you finding, and you teach, what is the subject that you were teaching, so that people can know?
Yeah, so when I was teaching at the university, it was mainly undergraduates, more of the freshman, sophomore. I've taught more freshmen, sophomores than I have upperclassmen.
More at the beginning of the university
more at the beginning.
Experience.
Yeah, so this would be literature, academic writing, professional writing, public writing, anything where you're expressing yourself in writing in some format, or evaluating how others have written.
So, on the topic of maybe men and women, are you finding that there are more men or women engaging in maybe the subject that you're teaching?
Back then, like the people who enrolled in my my classes. I mean,
They're undergrads.
they're
so they
undergrads, so
kinda have to take
they
it.
had to take it. This was part of their journey, and so I would have an equal number of young men and young women. But now that I'm teaching, I guess, more in the community, or real world people,
Yeah.
and I'm teaching the craft of writing fiction specifically.
Yeah.
So this is outside of the college setting. I get an equal number of men and women in that, and I was surprised. I straight up thought that I was going to have at least 75% women,
Okay.
but it's been about 50-50 in my meetups and in the workshops, and in the people that I work with one-on-one. Most of them are men.
So what do you think? What do you think is driving that? Because like there's studies now that saying aside from the STEM, 2/3 of university students are all women. So women are the ones that are getting more educated, which is fantastic. We
Yeah.
love that. But it's gonna come at the expense of women themselves, if you kind of understand what I'm saying. Because women like to be with equals when it comes to things like relationship. And if men are not coming up to the task mentally, which means they're not going to get there financially, who's going to be left high and dry at the end?
Yeah. This is a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can find one area to.
Which is different from the university, but it's something
Yeah.
that I heard the other day that there's just women are just excelling more.
They are, yeah.
But then on the dating end of the spectrum, they are not, because they just can't find anybody equal or
Right.
above.
Right.
So what can we do to try to keep the mental engagement on both sexes high enough so that it can reverberate in other parts of
Yeah.
culture and society?
Well, I really, let me see how to say this. I really believe in bringing together people from all different walks of life. It sounds so corny, but it's really important. So when I organize a meetup, or when I organize a local group here, so this is outside of the university,
Yeah.
I make sure that everybody is welcome. I do not have just a women's only group, and I don't want to say that that's not valuable,
Yeah.
because sometimes you want to be with your own so that you can discuss particular topics. But everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has a story to tell, and that's really all the qualifications you need to participate in a group that I facilitate. Do you have a story? Do you have an idea? Come right in. And I make everybody feel welcome, and we can talk about topics that are gender related, but I make sure I curate a space where both men and women have an opportunity to move forward. So I think that's a really important component to it, is we have to create those spaces where everybody is encouraged to self-actualize and explore what their potential is, and discuss with one another in a supportive environment what the next steps are.
That sounds fantastic. I love these answers. So, you were born in Tennessee?
No, I was born in Georgia,
You
but
were
I was
born
in
in
Tennessee
Georgia,
for high school.
so you've lived in that south,
Yeah.
that south
Yes.
area. So, could you speak on just the cultural difference between growing up in a place like Georgia, Tennessee, and then finding your way to South Florida, Miami, where there's a completely different cultural experience,
Yep.
and how that may have impacted your growth either way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Growing up in the South, every culture has their rules and their ways of being, and this is what we consider acceptable, and this is what we don't consider acceptable. And so in the South, there's a code of conduct, and I would
So
say.
could you elaborate more on what that code of conduct is exactly?
Yes.
Because I'm from the South, but I'm from Miami South.
Right,
it's a
right.
completely different type of South.
Yeah, I'm trying to. This is just going to take days and days to go over, but let me see if I can come up
Well,
with
this
some.
is a long form discussion.
Let me see if I can think of some examples. So, I would say in the South, your socioeconomic stratification is very clear. People make it known where they stand in the hierarchy. And a lot of that has to do with race. Maybe not in your bigger towns like in Atlanta, where you have a lot of confluence of culture, people from all over the place, but I grew up in a small town, and so you had your people who lived in this neighborhood and they were very well off.
Yeah.
They have a lot more mobility, and then you have people who grew up in another neighborhood and they don't have as much mobility. They're not members of the club,
Yeah.
literally and figuratively. And then you have people whose skin tone is not white,
Yes.
and it's very hard for them to move forward. And I observed all of that, and it never really seemed like a normal place to me.
Was there an age where it started to stand out to you? Because
Yeah.
do you think that when you're growing up in it, it's kind of hard to not see it because it's
Right.
kind of normal. It's
Yeah.
normal that you're growing up within. So was there an age where you started to critically think about it and see that, okay, this is maybe not my preferential way of seeing, not that it's, I don't want to say that it's right or wrong. I guess everybody can think about the way
Yeah.
they want to think about things, but was there at some point where you were like, where it just woke up in your head like, this is not
Yeah.
exactly how I would prefer things be?
Yeah, I would say as a little kid, I felt the social pressure not to mix and mingle.
Okay.
I'll just say it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't understand it. I thought it was cruel and unfair for everybody. And then gradually, I guess maybe in my adolescence, high school years, I didn't really think about it. I mean, I still sort of mixed and mingled, but I accepted to some degree the status quo. And then it was college, graduate school, more when the curriculum asked me to think more critically. More when I got to read books and poems by authors who are not dead and white and male.
Yes. So then there was the value in going out into the university setting to
Exactly.
help you teach how to, or learn how to see things more open and critically.
Yeah. So I got all of my formal education was in Georgia and Tennessee, all of it.
Okay.
And even then, even when I was in a university setting and learning salsa in these southern places, even though I had a lot of international people in my immediate vicinity, I still felt like the environment was not really where I wanted to be, and it was mostly cultural. And I was like, you know what? I want to move to a city, number one, where it's warm, number two, where I can expose myself to people who have different worldviews and who have lived and been to different places. And it's only been in this city that I have felt, to me it feels normal. To other people it feels foreign, like, oh, this is not America.
Yeah.
To me this feels like the most American place,
Mm-hmm.
even though most of the people here are not from America.
What does that mean to you, the most American place? What values about America make you say that this would be one of the most American places?
I think people have a lot of opportunity here. I mean, it's a hard city. When I moved here, I mean, it kicked me in the ass because it was just so big, there's traffic, and trying to make connections was really hard. But I felt like if I just worked hard and created possibility for myself and stuck to the plan, then things would open up. And that has been true. And it's not that it hasn't been true in other places, but what I see is I see that people of color here have opportunities that they don't in other places. People who have immigrated here from other countries and maybe their English isn't perfect, but it's functional enough, they have opportunities. They can find their group and they can make something happen. You go to small town Georgia, you're not going to be able to make that happen. The doors will not be open. And so that is what feels American to me.
It's the land of opportunity.
Yeah.
All right, that's awesome. So going back to, they say how you are now has to do a lot with how you were raised as a kid. Did you say your parents had much to do with the way that you are as a woman now, as an adult woman?
In terms of my work ethic, for sure, they saw early on that I had some academic aptitude and that I had the ability to succeed and excel in different areas. So they always encouraged me to do that, and they provided the resources for me to be able to do that. Anytime I said I wanted to do something, they would be like, okay, let's sign you up for lessons.
Yeah.
So they, for sure, with
and if you liked it or didn't like it, were they like, okay, you tried it, it's
yeah,
okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And they always let me explore what it was that I wanted to do, and they saw that I was self-motivated. Nobody had to crack the whip and make me do it. They just sort of provided the resources and stepped back and let me do it.
Awesome. So, being that was your experience, and now you are an adult, you're a university professor, do you see how different parenting styles manifested themselves in your classroom?
I never had much interaction with parents as a college
But just
professor.
the students themselves are a product of kind of where they came from or
That's a good question. I would say, so my teaching experience in Miami, the 2 years that I taught at Miami-Dade College and Barry University, was much different than teaching in Tennessee and Georgia. So
Can you just speak about that? The
Yeah, yeah.
differences between the two different cultural places?
yes. So teaching at UGA and UT, there were a lot of students from the suburbs with a lot of money who had pretty much had every opportunity handed to them.
What does that mean? Every opportunity handed to you?
So
Every
they,
financial opportunity.
every financial opportunity, they would get some great summer job at their dad's office, like their dad's a big shot lawyer, something like that. So they would have professional opportunities already at hand.
How about emotional and just human opportunity, like the opportunity of learning how to be a good human as opposed to
Well, a lot of them, they probably had grown up in a church, and so their exposure to the world or how to help would be on a mission trip, something like that.
Yes.
So you do get a little exposure, I guess, through that, but it's through the lens of a Christian or a faith-based mindset.
Yes.
So I would have a lot of students who would report that they had gone to Ecuador or something like that over the summer to help build a house.
And did they feel that changed a part of their outlook on life doing that?
Yeah, I would say from an economic standpoint, yeah, they see that not everybody has the same resources and that life is very different and very tough. When you don't live in the suburbs and have a car handed to you at 16 and things like that. But I would say like they come right back to college and they get with their fraternity, sorority cohorts and their classmates, and it's sort of business as usual.
So do you think that maybe those systems of fraternity, sorority, although they were a little bit open, it pulls them back a little, or does it? Because you need that social interaction as
Right.
well amongst your peers.
Yeah.
But again, what I want to do is just try to find more ways of making the world better for as many people as possible. And I think going on a mission trip, even if it's funded or faith-based or whatever, that's going to open your eyes and make you see things differently than you did before.
Yeah.
So how much of that will stick when they come back and get back again into their sorority, fraternity, and go back to business as usual? Might there be a 1% change that over time creates a whole different trajectory that may be better for overall culture? Or do you think it just goes right back?
I don't think it just goes right back, and it is so based on the individual's sense of things. Definitely sororities and fraternities, they will have charities and they'll provide opportunities for people to do things like Big Brother, Big Sister. But you're still talking about really affluent people of a certain ethnic identity who are going into communities that are less fortunate, and they're reinforcing the same structure of I have everything, you have nothing, let me be the savior. So I do think that universities and whatever extracurricular programs they have, like the Greek system, if there's a way to create more balanced activities where there's more of a cultural exchange as opposed to I'm going to help you because you need it, I think that would help.
So more of we're going to help each other.
Yeah, we're going to help each other. We're going to learn from one another. And there's a educational theory called popular education.
Popular education.
So it's more about taking groups or communities that have different resources, different abilities, and sticking them in a room, and everybody has to work together to get to the next level. So there's no person in charge necessarily. You can have a facilitator, but there's no, here's the thing we're going to learn and we're going to shove it onto you and then you take it away.
They learn from experience of actually having to accomplish something. Which is a much better way of teaching things. And that's something that I've been thinking about lately too, especially I have kids that are about to graduate high school. My son's going to graduate this year, my daughter in 2 years, and I've thought about just the way the system works at all to begin with. And I was telling my wife's son this week that, because he was complaining about a class and that, oh, why do I need to learn this? And I'm like, and he also knows my views on the way that schools are run right now, that I think it's kind of not as efficient
Nope.
as it could be. But I did tell him, look, the information that they're trying to teach you is useful. Just the way that they go about teaching it to you
Yeah.
needs a 21st century revamping.
Right.
Because it's a late 18th or 19th century invention trying to work on a 21st century world that's just way too fast
Absolutely.
to keep up.
Yep.
So what they're learning in school is it's fundamental knowledge, you know, history, science, all the basic things that need to be learned. But speaking on this that you were just mentioning, how can we go about maybe planting seeds somewhere to get schools to begin to see things a little different? Maybe students shouldn't be sitting down all day. Maybe
Right.
they should be up and touching and talking and being with each other, because then they're interacting more, which can come up with more solutions when you're interacting instead of just sitting somewhere.
Right.
So, do you have any ideas on how maybe we just talk about the ideas of some sort of implementation like that? And maybe if we get a whole bunch of people to be our fans, we'll go to government places and lobby for that.
Yeah, I can guarantee you there are so many teachers who would love to be able to implement that. Now, if you're talking about K through 12, which I don't have all that much experience with K through 12. Definitely, teachers are much more restricted in what they can do, because you have to graduate kids from high school. That's what you have to do, and you have to get them to pass those tests, which are a whole nightmare unto themselves.
But again, that's looking at things through that 19th century
Yeah.
looking glass. Now, yes, we need to get kids to graduate, but we need to get them to graduate and feel inspired to do something, instead
Right.
of just pulling them along through some,
Yeah.
you know, like my son is having serious existential angst right now because he doesn't know what he wants to be.
Right.
And I keep telling him, you're a good student, just go have experiences. Where school should be about compiling just basic experiences where you can then speak to the children and be like, what did you think about that
Yeah.
experience? And then you'll start to see where the kids kind of gravitate to. And in whatever they gravitate to, they're going to need the fundamental knowledge,
Yeah.
because physics is physics throughout all subjects.
Absolutely, yeah. This is just really tough because the teachers really want to do it. I know they want to do it, but to some degree
They're handcuffed for sure.
they're handcuffed. And then you've got this whole deal of college really isn't the promise that it used to be. You're racking up all this debt
Yes.
for no guarantee of any sort of job that can help you live your life and have a livelihood and pay off all of that debt. And students are starting to see that, and they're not, the system doesn't set students up to be able to apply any sort of knowledge. And as much as teachers would like to do these great field trips and to spend some classroom time on these activities that would really open these things up, it's just, there's not a lot of possibility for that. The only possibility I would see is just giving teachers more freedom to use the curriculum and use the basics at their own disposal and come up with their own ways of conveying it.
If we could start the whole thing from scratch, what would you think of a system that doesn't even have grades, like K through 12?
Yeah.
It's just, maybe this 10th grader gets along with this 3rd grader, and because they get along, they can teach each other things. And, because you never know who you're going to gravitate to if you just
Yeah.
let the gravitating happen.
Yeah, you're talking about a whole restructuring of society.
Yes. I wouldn't mind having that conversation. I think the conversation needs to start to be had. And it's not a restructuring completely, because, the system that we live in, this American system, to this point has been one of the best systems that humans have been able to come up with to
Right.
get people out of poverty
Yeah.
and into somewhere else.
Yeah.
But we live in a dynamic universe. We're not living in that world so we need to be just as dynamic. So, and we need to be able to grow faster and learn faster because technology is demanding it.
Yeah, I think the main value that public schools can offer is that you can get lots and lots of people through the system if you keep to the system.
Yeah.
But somehow, if there's a way that is economically sound and culturally sound, and by that I mean where things don't start falling apart. You don't have kids just running around all over the place and parents don't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
But if there's some kind of way to achieve what you're talking about, what you're talking about seems more like an elaborate homeschooling co-op. Because I've known some homeschoolers where they would have their kids go to these various classes, and then sometimes they would work from home. And it seemed like a great system. You can have a lot more control over what your children are learning, and they learn faster and more
Yeah.
academically.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not quite as socialized, or they're just socialized a little differently.
Which is a whole different aspect.
Right.
Because my daughter is the more social. She
Yeah.
learns more from being in social
Yeah.
interaction, where my son is more the book learning.
Yeah.
You know, they just learn in different ways.
Yeah. So I think parents that have a lot of resources could probably achieve that.
Yeah.
Parents who do not have a lot of resources, they're not going to really have the means to provide that opportunity.
So maybe it's because what I do for a living, you know,
Yeah.
people have extra income to even afford me as a service.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that I see the parents that have the resources that they're trying to outsource all the resourcing to other people because of whatever reason, because they can. But that takes away the actual parent from connecting with the child.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it's always a benefit to have the resources. Where somebody who doesn't have the resources, they may have to sit down with
Yeah.
the kid and actually
Yeah.
connect and teach, and you know, they connect together in
Yeah.
that space. So there's pros and cons to both ways, of
Right,
course.
yeah.
But again, I'm not afraid to try to shake up the system if I had
Oh, yeah.
if I was, I don't know what the word is, if I was fortunate enough to find myself in that position that I could shake it up, I'd be more than happy to. Because
Yeah.
I think it's in shaking things up that you really find out what works, what doesn't work. Because we've been doing what we've been doing for a long time. And you know, the millennials, they get a lot of flack for being entitled, and they may be. But I also think that they've seen a generation of their parents and their grandparents work themselves to death, and they don't want to do that. They're like, you guys are working and working and working, and you're miserable, and I'm miserable because you guys treat
Yeah.
me miserable because all you care about is making ends meet instead of, you know, making ends meet within our relationship.
Right, and I would say, as far as the millennial boomer divide, the boomers worked hard and they saw a return on that.
Yes.
Whereas the millennials, they're working, they're struggling,
Yeah.
but they can't move forward because they can't find a job with benefits.
Yeah.
So they're like cobbling some possibility together, and they've got this mountain of debt, like I was talking about,
Yeah.
and they can't see that return,
Yeah.
like our parents were able to.
Exactly. So, and again, did our parents really get a return? Because half of them don't seem to be that happy
Right.
with the return that they're getting.
Right. I mean, you know, they have like a nice 401k set up or a nice retirement set up, so they're comfortable in that way. But I don't think that particular generation was really taught to explore oneself or to be self-aware.
Yeah, because they were being taught to be a cog in the machine.
Yeah, and to
So-
just be behind the white picket fence and like, this is your life, it's all nice. See,
Yeah.
don't we like it?
Which, going back to something completely different, it just made me think of that. That's a border.
Yeah.
That white picket fence, that's a border.
Yeah.
What's behind that border may not be the best thing ever,
Yeah.
but that's a border. So there's something about just creating the illusion of wanting to be behind this
Yeah.
border. Now that gets into, now we can talk more about immigration and things like this, but what is it about us? And maybe it's part of physics, because this is a border, right? So maybe there's something just physically natural about having some sort of border. And
Yeah.
now I'm going out there, I know that.
Well, you know, you can apply economic theories to things like that, to your own body, to your own, like, you know, this is my stuff, I bought it, I earned it, and
Yeah.
it's not yours.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put a fence around it. I'm gonna make it look nice so that you can't really see what's going on. I have the right
Yeah.
to my privacy.
And you do, and you should have that right.
Yeah.
And this country that we've created with
Yeah.
the freedom of being able to do that. So that also brings me now to, you know, we can get into politics a little. You have conservative, you have liberal, and the conservative way of being would be that I worked for this. This is mine. I shouldn't have to give it to anybody else. And are they wrong in thinking that? Is that fundamentally a wrong way of thinking?
Yeah, that's I like this question, and I guess I'll start off by saying I consider myself more of a libertarian. You know, I don't even really like to participate in this bipartisan system. But as far as like claiming ownership over one's possessions, I think there's a certain amount of dignity in the investment that you put in and the blood, sweat, and tears that it takes, you know, to succeed. And you know, when some larger entity comes along and says, "I'm sorry, that's not acceptable. We're just gonna like redistribute it how we see it."
Yeah.
There is something really infuriating about that.
Yes.
Now, if there are, so I guess in that way, I would probably lean a little bit more towards the conservative camp, because I don't really think that the government, in most cases, really knows properly how to do the redistributing.
Yeah. Well, then the thing is that for a government to truly redistribute from just the examples we have of history, you'd have to end up in some sort of authoritarian dictator type to make sure I'm going to take this from you and give it to these people over here, because that's really the only way you can really do it. And we don't want any of that.
Yeah, and we've seen it doesn't work.
That doesn't really work.
It doesn't work, you know, even it sounds all nice and good, like yes, everybody should have something, but it just starts falling apart, you know?
And you know, the reason I thought about this also is because, you know, I have a son who's about to get into voting age, so, you know, he lives, you know, down here, South Florida. It's much more blue than red, but my son is a thinking, again, he's more academic, so I sat him down and I said, look, let's do this by teams. The red team believes that if you work hard, you should be able to keep what you work for, and there should be a little bit of people up here telling you to do with the things that you work for. The blue team over here thinks, you know, we should do as much as possible to help as many people as possible, because if nobody feels desperate because they feel like they're falling out of the system, number one, crime will be down, because you don't have to resort to desperate action to try to get yourself into the game. So then I asked him, which one of those ideas is bad? And he didn't have an answer, and I'm like, that's good. I kind of set it up for you to realize that the fundamentals of both of these sides are not coming from a bad place. And once you realize that, then you can have a conversation about things. Then as you experience life, you can say, you know, I've worked hard for this. I wouldn't mind giving a little bit away. So, number one, you need to give some away for the roads tours. So
exactly.
At least know that. Know that.
For the fire department to save you.
Yes, if they need to get to you. So know that you need to give a little to the system that is creating this opportunity for you at all. But you know, should you have to give it most of it away? Just because you're the one who worked hard, you're the one. But again, the people at the bottom that feel disenfranchised, and if we're going to be honest, we do live in a world, like as you said, growing up in the South, there's a group that have less opportunity. And you know, this is a saying that I like that came from the intellectual dark web, and it's that we should really work hard to make you know, opportunity equal. We need equity of opportunity. Not equity of outcome, but equity of opportunity. Everybody should have an opportunity for whatever they're good at. If they work hard, they should be able to go. And no matter what, you're gonna have people who do it better than others. And you know, LeBron is gonna be one of the best basketball players because he just is. I'm not gonna be LeBron. As much as that would have been a blessing to have that sort of ability, I'm just not. But I have the ability to have these conversations where maybe LeBron doesn't like to have conversations like this. So there should be a space where everybody has an equal amount of opportunity. So how, you know, that's not a bad idea. So again, what ideas can we get out of each of us to make more equity of opportunity, so that I can tell my son, you can work hard and you can do things, and with your money maybe you can help, if you have enough of it, if you're fortunate enough to build something, that you can help other people have more opportunity.
You know, it takes people like you and me who have the aptitude in a particular area, or you know, a range of areas, who also have the vision to spark conversations like this, create the space for it.
Yeah.
And to welcome people no matter what their credentials are.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got something to share, please come and share it.
Because you have a life, you have a story to tell.
Yeah.
That I have not experienced.
Yeah.
And I can learn something from your story if we just sit down and listen, number one. Which that's something we should really work on as just humans in general,
Right,
is more listening. Me first, I'll be the first one to admit I need to listen more.
Yeah.
I'm sure my wife
Me too.
will be the first one to say that's the truth. Take your own advice.
Yeah.
But
Stop waiting for your turn to talk.
so yeah, that's I kind of lost my train of thought now. Edit that part out. So equity of opportunity, but not equity of outcome.
Yeah, and you know what? And I think going back to thinking about economies, there are different economies that are emerging that are making things easier. Like for example, you know, the share economy,
The gig economy.
the gig economy. It makes it possible for people to earn a little extra and use the resources that they have outside of the normal way of doing things, like a cab or a hotel.
Yeah.
You can just use what you have.
So now let's expand on that, because now that brings us to the whole artificial intelligence. Because artificial intelligence within our lifetimes we'll be able to at least do the cabs and the Airbnb. So how do we transfer people to a place where, okay, now your worth is going to be by what you create instead of what you can do to make money.
Right. Yeah.
How do we transfer that? It needs to, I think, start again in the elementary schools. It needs to start small. That what you put out into the world is going to be what your, I guess, worth ends up being.
Yeah.
Because anybody can be an Uber driver right now, and that's fine. That we live in a time where, if you are at last resort, at least you can go do that. But we are also coming upon a time where that's not going to need to be done.
Right, yeah, because machines are going to take over their jobs. I've had this conversation before, like, if I had the kind of job that could be replaced by a machine, I think what I would do is really think about what can never be replaced by a machine. You can't provide human connection.
Yeah, no.
So economies are emerging for that. For example, I use Meetup as a tool to create my community. That is a company.
Yeah.
They are profiting off of the money that people spend to create their own communities.
Yeah.
But the whole value proposition is we get people together in real life.
Yes.
There is no machine. I mean, Meetup has the app and all the technology.
Yeah.
But there is no machine that can replace that value proposition. So the more people can train themselves to, in whatever way, provide the human connection that nothing can ever replace, then new little economies are going to be.
Yeah,
I'm not even worried about it.
I'm not. Yeah.
AI, do your thing. Here,
Yeah.
be a machine and do these automated things,
Yeah.
please, because I don't feel like doing that.
I don't want to drive anymore if I don't have to.
Exactly.
Only for leisure and like.
Yeah, I love automation. Like, please do all this, like, ropes.
Now there are things like, again, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend to be an expert at anything AI.
Yeah.
Because I haven't looked into it that much. All I hear is when I hear an occasional podcast here and there, and when I do hear those things, some people sound concerned. Now I don't know if those concerns are ever gonna come to being, but some people, sound concerned because we don't understand consciousness. And how about if we create it by accident?
Yeah.
Then what?
I mean,
There's no putting that genie back in the bottle after that. So.
Yeah. That's a real concern. I would say.
And how do we know it'll be a concern? Because they're made in our image. And our image is, when we look through our image, through history, it's not the best of images. Yeah,
that and just, when you create something, you sort of assert a little bit of control over, I made it so I know how it works, and I can dismantle it if I need to. But if you create something that starts to have control over itself, and you don't know what its capabilities are physically or anything else, I can see how this makes people nervous.
And again, I am not an expert at this at all,
Right,
but I do remember an article that I came across that Facebook had to shut down some
I came across that article.
AI because they started communicating in their own languages without anybody.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting times we live in. But then again, I think every time is an interesting time to have been living in.
Yeah.
So with that, I think we've had a pretty good conversation.
Oh, yeah.
So Julie, Tyler, everybody, let's hug it out. We need more hugs out there. So thank you very much for
Thank
your
you,
time
this
and
was
attention.
great.
I
This was
appreciate
great.
it. And look for more idea sex discussions where we keep trying to propagate good ideas. Peace and love.